Move was a group that I think provoked a lot of questions because of limits and lines in society, right? And so, we believe, or we tend to believe, that people should have a lot of freedom in the way that they raise their children. But at what point, if you're malnourishing your children, is it society's job to come and do something about that?
And if they're
right?
living not even down the block, but immediately next door. Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with Reason TV, and today we're talking with Jason Osder. He's an assistant professor of media and public affairs at George Washington, and he is the director of the incredible movie Let the Fire Burn, which is about the 1985 MOVE disaster in Philadelphia. This is a documentary, a terrifying documentary about a government action gone horribly wrong, about many other things. It's about race, it's about class, it's about police. Talk about MOVE, which was this group in Philadelphia that had fractious relationships with its neighbors and police. What was MOVE?
MOVE, as you say, was a group. It was founded in the early 70s, and one thing I like to point out about MOVE is it was many things, and it took place over a number of years. Early on, they didn't call themselves, but they were called a back to nature group. Some of their beliefs included eating raw food, embracing everything that they deemed life. So that was all living things, all animal life, and they were, through their history, primarily but not exclusively African American, but again always would reject sort of a classification based on race. They were not a Black Power group, for instance. It's also important that in the early days they were very much felt, and I think were in opposition to the Philadelphia police under Frank Rizzo. So they did become more militant over time, but from their point of view they became more militant not because they wanted to be militant, but very much in response to a militant police force that was brutalizing them.
In 1978, there was a shooting incident between the police and MOVE. What happened then, and then how did that set up what happened in 1985?
So in 1978, MOVE came in violent conflict with the police, or actually deadly conflict with the police for the first time. And it was in this house in an area called Powelton Village. And gunshots were fired, and one police officer was killed, 2 firefighters were wounded. All of the people in the house were taken out and arrested. 1 was brutally beaten on camera. Later, 9 people in the group were convicted for the murder of the cop. His name was James Ramp. They became known as the MOVE 9. They were all convicted to 30 to life. They defended themselves, and it was somewhat of a circus trial. And the way this sets up what happens later is that both groups being the Philadelphia Police and the MOVE organization, feel to be the wounded party. So later in 1985, the MOVE group very much is becoming aggressively active to get these cases of the MOVE 9 looked at it again. That's never going to happen. They've been convicted for killing a cop. On the other hand, the police feel as though they've lost one of their own and that this group has violent, deadly potential, and they're not going to lose another one of their own.
Right, and there had been, in 1985, MOVE had moved out of Powelton Village, moved into Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia. Their neighbors were complaining, right? Because MOVE, among other things, was composting and drawing rats to the area. They were blaring things out of public speakers, all manner of night and day. So what happened in 1985? Just very quickly sketch. And I realize that's asking a lot because it's a complex situation. But
well, first it's important to know that the house is fairly heavily fortified. Okay, it has slats over all the windows. It has 2 large bunkers on the roof, which are fortified and also set up to have gun ports, right? So you have a group that is known to be armed, known, at least according to the police, to have killed, and they are heavily fortified.
So there's a standoff. The police show up. What was the immediate cause of the police showing up in '85?
They have issued warrants for arrest of people inside the house, and those warrants are based on various violations and just based on they basically built this argument of the neighbors up to the point where they do have arrest warrants for people in the house. They've evacuated everything else, and there's essentially a huge battle for several hours in the morning. It's clear in retrospect that at least at some points the police were reacting to their own gunfire. Mm-hmm. They are fairly convinced that there is automatic gunfire, and they're responding to automatic gunfire with their own automatic gunfire. It's fairly clear in retrospect that MOVE may or may not had some firearms, but they definitely did not have automatic firearms. They've used tear gas, they've used explosives, they used fire hoses. Mm-hmm. They have fire hoses trained on the building trying to knock away the different things. Tear gas, all of this, and the group will not come out. And oddly, there's a quiet period, several hours in the afternoon. They regroup, both sides regroup. No one knows what's going to happen, and the police form a new plan. They're going to use explosives dropped from a helicopter to destroy the bunker on the roof, which is the main fortification that they are worried about. They drop this bomb. It fails to dislodge the bunker. It starts a small fire on the roof, an insipid fire, and they make a strategic decision to not fight that fire. And it sort of adds to the irony that hoses are already trained because they've been using hoses as a weapon, but now no fire hoses to put out the fire. 5 children and 6 adults are killed.
Oh, okay.
1 adult and 1 child escapes, right? So
yeah.
in the house is a total of 13.
Right.
And there is also a lot of drama. So once the house is, more than the house, the block is on fire. Right. The police are also in the back alley where people are trying to escape, and there is substantial evidence that people are trying to escape the burning house while police are actually firing on them, forcing them back in. Now that's a disputed part of the story,
right,
and there are no cameras on that part.
And there are, I mean, there's a lot of things that are in dispute.
Yes.
This is, I mean, it's highly reminiscent of Waco. It's almost kind of like a prequel to that, where there's a lot of, you know, contravening facts all the way around, and nobody really knows exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It's a story with a lot of but what abouts and what ifs. And that even starts from your first question, what is MOVE? It's not, you can't pin it down. And then I wanted to create a film where moment by moment, you had to look at these situations.
So what happened in the aftermath of this total disaster?
Yeah, you know, in some ways, surprisingly little happened in the aftermath. So there were... the adult survivor was arrested. The childhood survivor went to live with his father, who wasn't part of the group. The adult survivor, Ramona Africa, was tried, defended herself, was convicted of, I think, conspiracy to riot, convicted to 8 years in prison. By the way, the people from 1978, the Move 9, they're still in prison. There were hearings held in the city, which the film also features, public hearings, somewhat of the style, almost like Truth and Reconciliation, extra-legal body, not a court of law. That was certainly interesting for the film and interesting for the community, but had no power to prosecute, no power to subpoena. So people appeared voluntarily, and no one was prosecuted. I mean, and no one was ever prosecuted.
What are some of the big takeaways from this, or the relevance of the the MOVE bombing and your film now? Because clearly, violent confrontations between minority groups, whether they're religious or ideological or racial or ethnic, and the police have not gone away. We live in a highly charged society now. What are the big messages here? What can people benefit from in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, what I want most of all is for people to look around the world, the historical world and the contemporary world critically, and ask, this is history. And we want to learn about it, but we want to learn about it so it informs the present. And I think I want people to ask, where is violence being done to people with no regard for their humanity? And where are children being sort of played as pawns in conflicts about adults' beliefs, and people without agency or losing their lives in that way? I think you came very close or alluded to it earlier. The MOVE was a group that I think provoked a lot of questions because of limits and lines in society, right? And so, we believe, or we tend to believe, that people should have a lot of freedom in the way that they raise their children. But at what point, if you're malnourishing your children, is it society's job to come and do something about that?
And if they're living not even down the block, but immediately next door.
Right, or
in a row house.
That's right, that's right. And where's the limits of, for instance, take any right that we have.
Right.
Free speech, right? Is it my free speech to put a loudspeaker on my roof and berate the whole neighborhood? And they were extremely good at provoking those limits. And so it really asks, as a democratic society, what to do with groups that are willing to stand behind their beliefs to the point where they'll risk their own lives, risk the lives of their children? How do we deal with that problem? And I think it's extremely relevant today how we deal with that problem. And I think, specifically, the way I designed the film is I want people to bring their own context to it. And it's fascinating to me when I travel around and people will bring up a local, people in New York, people say, this reminds me of stop and frisk. And in North Carolina, I say, do you know about this incident that's happening here where people's rights are being violated? And I sometimes I relate more than others, right? Sometimes I don't get the connection. But I always want people to be, that's what I want from the film. And two that really resonate with me. One is the incident on, I always forget the name of the bridge in New Orleans, the after Katrina,
Right,
and the people are shot back across it. And to me, that same sense of fire and water, these two historical, fraught American cities, there's a real resonance there between those two incidents. And the other one, oddly, is the drone war. Right, and this idea that in our foreign policy, we've reached this point where we have such a fear of implicating our own troops, and this, our guys, no boots will hit the ground, but from higher and higher above, we'll drop more and more powerful explosives. Right. And if a few, innocents on the ground are killed, then that's the price of war, not, And so those resonate with me a lot, but at Q&As, when people bring up these topics, I just want you to think about it.
Well, it certainly does that. The movie is Let the Fire Burn. It's about the 1985 disastrous, tragic bombing of the MOVE organization in West Philadelphia. The director is Jason Osder. He works at George Washington University. Thank you so much for talking to us. For Reason TV, I'm Nick Gillespie.